Alrighty, testing, 1, 2, 3. We're going to give it just a few more minutes because we are early, but I'm really excited to continue on in doing this live tutorial of Microsoft Project with you all. There's going to be a few links and there will be a couple announcements as well, so just give it a couple moments and then we'll basically get started. So, few minutes. I know you're going to hear some radio silence. I am not as tech savvy yet with all of this streaming, so pardon me with there's a lack of music. And especially with everything going on today. And the holidays are coming, which that's going to be another thing we're going to talk about. So get ready, peeps. We've got one more minute and then we're going to get going. All right, we are at 8:25. I know that's 5 minutes before 8:30 as we have scheduled, but I'm just going to go ahead and get started because there's a few things I got to cover before we continue on with the live tutorial of Microsoft Project. So, welcome back, PM Peeps, to PM Corner, where we continue our education in project management and other tools and skill sets that you would use in the real world. So, before we begin, I do want to mention a couple things. So I know the schedule for the streams have been a little funky this past month. It's going to be the same way for the month of December a little bit, although it's going to kind of fall into the twice a month kind of deal. Although technically, if I do in December, it will be technically 3 times in the month of December. But with that said, so we're having this tutorial today because next week is obviously Thanksgiving, and I'm pretty sure most people would want to, hang out with their family, friends, or whatever it is you do on, Thanksgiving. So, and I'm going to be also with family. So, that is that. So the next streams we're going to have on this channel will be on December 1st and December 15th. And then after that, that will be it for the rest of 2022. And then we will pick up next year on a regular cadence where we will be posting 2 to 3 times a month. So, depending on the month and how things fall, right? So, it'll just depend. And so, that is that announcement. Secondly, if you look at the chat, there is a couple of links. First and foremost, it would be much appreciated if you like to donate to this channel just to keep it going so people are able to enjoy more content and be able to learn more and new skill sets and new information and so forth. And then secondly, I do have a course on Udemy right now. It's called Microsoft Project, a Practical Tutorial, where it goes over the basics in great detail and it allows you to keep it forever. And there's a coupon in there where you can purchase my course on Udemy for 15 bucks basically. And that's available until December 17th. So take advantage of that, look at my course, get a feel for it. Obviously, if you're not part of the live stream, that's fine. I'm going to post the link in my YouTube channel description as well. I will also include in the YouTube description a book that really is useful that I used when I first started learning Microsoft Project. It is the step-by-step Microsoft Project Guide. It will be for obviously 2019 because they haven't, as I've seen on Amazon, not quite yet posted the 2021 version. So you're still stuck with the 2019, but it doesn't matter. It's not that different if you use 2016 versus 2021 versus not 2019. So those are the couple announcements I have. Also, please give me a follow on Twitter, on Twitch, on YouTube, and on TikTok. It would be greatly appreciated as well. And with that said, so let's get started. So last time when we were building out the Microsoft project schedule, we had already built in resources, tasks, cost, obviously, because we associated cost. We also baselined the whole schedule, as you can see right here. So everything is baselined. And we did go over at the very end the various types of reports that would be very useful and helpful if you wanted to make things easier on yourself. Obviously, there's a lot more customization, but I don't think I'm going to go quite into that today. But if you're interested in future tutorials on how to do more advanced stuff in Microsoft Project, please let me know and I'd be more than happy to do more streams on Microsoft Project as well. So we've also linked things. We've linked our milestones. We've linked our tasks. We've also associated our resource names in our groups. We've got our durations. So now we're all set and ready to go. Now, there's a couple of things I do want to cover because I think I didn't cover them last time. So we are going to talk about the earned value piece of this a little bit because there is an earned value report that we talked about at the end of the last stream, and their columns are just not in here. We'll also go over critical path, and then we're going to start playing around in the schedule to kind of show you how things shift and move and how cost in this column is going to change as you make adjustments and shifts and so forth. And then, of course, we'll then look at some of the reports to get you a little bit more familiar with how they'll present based on how you status and how you do things. And then also, because the chat's now open, if you got any questions for me at the end, please feel free and don't be shy to ask any questions, because after all, the point of this tutorial is to help you be more confident in using Microsoft Project. So with that said, I'm going to add a couple more columns. So if you're familiar with EVM, great. If you're not, basic plain terms, EVM is a type of management system that goes beyond what financial analysts do, which is they look at like what you've actually done versus what you're, forecasting. What earned value tends to do is to look at, okay, well, not only am I comparing my walk to my talk, right? Because your talk is your baseline, your walk is what you're actually doing, but also, am I really adhering to my talk with my walk or am I not? And that's where your schedule performance indexes come in, your cost performance indexes, your schedule and cost variances, your ETCs, your which ETC does have multiple different types of formulas depending on what you're trying to achieve. Your EACs, your BACs, all that fun jazz. So there is ACWP, which is actual cost work performed. So this is how much you've spent to do the work. Then you have, what's the other one? The schedule. Well, ACWP, then there's BCWP, which is baseline cost work performed. That's, again, your baseline. And it should show up, but it's not. So this is the other thing. The earned value columns are very finicky, and they tend to be for whatever reason. Then you've got your BCWS. This is baseline cost work scheduled. What baseline cost work schedule, and it kind of shows you a little bit here, as you can see, and I think that's based on the status, so that's going to be interesting how that works, which we'll get into when we start statusing and everything. So you got actual cost work performed, you got baseline budget cost work performed, baseline cost work performed, you got budget cost or baseline cost work scheduled. What baseline cost work schedule is going to help you with the schedule indexes, and the schedule variance, because you also need to understand how much work did you actually accomplish within your schedule. And what earn value is in the formulas. So for the variances and for the performance indexes, you use EV. And there's a 4-minute video on YouTube that's fantastic that explains earn value and how to do earn value very quickly with the main formulas for, again, the cost performance indexes and the schedule performance index and the cost and schedule variances. And what he says is correct. Earn value, or EV, is king. And so anytime you want to understand your indexes and your costs and your variances, right? Your EV is always part of the equation. And what EV says is, how much did I earn? And that's based upon the percent complete times your budget at completion. So it's how much percentage did you actually accomplish, which is where you got then also your actual cost. How much did you actually spend to get there? Now, as you can see, your BCWS is kind of showing here. I don't know why this one. See, as I said, they're very finicky in that regard. I want to see if earned value is in here. Yes, so the EV, so your percent complete, so how much did you actually complete, which you're also going to see when we start statusing, but I just wanted to show you those columns because they're interesting to see. Again, though, they're extremely finicky. Okay, so I'm going to add a couple things in here. Well, actually, probably just one more thing in here. So I'm just going to add another column, and it's called the percent complete column. This is the more automated column, as I like to call it, or, well, not call it, but describe it, because when you make any adjustments to it, it will actually have an impact. Whereas if you did the physical percent complete, this is a very manual column, and I'm going to show you how it works when we get into it. And then there's percent work complete, which is another one. But we're just going to focus on these two for right now. So of course we've got that. So we've got those inputted in. What else do I want to go over? Oh yeah, I want to show you critical path. So there's kind of multiple ways to do critical path when it comes to Microsoft Project. So I'm going to pull out this little Gantt chart if you remember. Oh, don't do that. And by the way, if you make any mistakes on your keyboard, just hit Control Z and it undoes it for you. You don't have to do the, manual undo button. You can just hit Control C. So in the Gantt chart format, if you see up here, you click on that, and in bar styles, you're going to see there's a little checkbox for Slack, late tasks, and critical tasks. So what's going to happen is that if I check this little box, it will show you what is on the critical path. And as you can see, that's basically everything. And the reasoning why is because we have a set finish date of January 1st of 2024. Let me make sure of that because, it's been a bit of a week. So again, if you want to double check, yes. So our finish date is January 1st of 2024 because we set the schedule from project finish date. So everything will look like it's pretty much critical, which is not very helpful, right? Because we, at the end of the day, know that not everything is critical. That doesn't make sense whatsoever, right? I keep doing that. There we go. We're just going to fix that. So, and there's a way to fix that. So, we have this thing here called the constraint date. So, and let me just click on this and let me show you how that works when it comes to constraint dates. So as you see here, you just double click on your task or the line itself, and it brings up this task information, window. So it tells you all the stuff, like the general stuff. It tells you its predecessor, if it has any. And not only does it tell you the predecessor, it tells you the ID. Now, there are two types of IDs in Microsoft Project. You have ID, which is over here, that constantly shifts and moves when you move tasks around, when when you delete tasks, if you move them, that will always shift and move. Then there's unique ID, which I'll add after I kind of walk you through what this task information window does. There's unique ID, which doesn't change. So the moment you input a task, the unique ID is made. And once the unique ID is made, that's it. It is associated only to that task. And if you delete that task, it will not be used again. Unless, of course, you open a new project file. Then it will be used again. But if it's in the same project file, once that unique ID is used and you delete the task, you can't use it again. And so if you've ever looked at schedules and saw the unique ID column and see how there might be skips and jumps between, the numbering system within it, it indicates that tasks have been removed. And the other thing too is it tells you the type of relationship, which again, you have start to start, finish to start, and start to finish, right? So finish to start is the most common. Like 99.9% of the time, a finish to start is always used for tasks. Then you have what is called the start to start relationship, which we have done in the last tutorial, where my predecessor task has to start in order for my successor task to start. And then, of course, there's finish to finish, which does the reverse. So instead of with the start date, it's with the finish date. So again, my predecessor task has to finish in order for my successor task to finish. Then there's start to finish, which I have never seen used. In my mind, it's kind of useless. So it means that my predecessor task must start in order for my successor task to finish. And in reality, you could do like a lag with that if you really wanted to make that kind of shift, in my mind. But that's of course my opinion. Some people may not agree with me. Some people might be like, yeah, that's kind of valid. It doesn't matter. It's my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt, throw it in the trash, take it and use it, whatever. Then it also tells you lags, if there's any lags in your, task, which as you see, we do have a couple lags, as you can see on line 24 down here, in the successor column, there's a lag of 7 days, which that's fine. Again, you should only use lags if you have a waiting period. I would never use a lag if I know there are other tasks that are missing, right? Because you want to make sure that when you present this to your client, because remember, most times when you're building a schedule, it's not just for yourself. It's not just for your team. It's also for your stakeholders, your clients. If your clients are not aware of when you're going to have things done, when are things due, that's not going to create trust in, you from them. So you need to present something like a schedule that's going to help them go, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing. And that also means you, as a project manager and as a master scheduler, which I can talk about what a master scheduler is at the end of this tutorial, you need to ensure that you are capturing maybe not every little micro thing you're doing, but if you can tell the story of how you're getting from point A to point B, from beginning to end of the project, in a way that's enough detail that your client doesn't become overwhelmed when they look at it, but also it's manageable. And this is the thing that the PMBOK talks about in the PMBOK from the PMI Institute, is that you need to have realistic schedules. And it also means that it has to be sufficient in detail, that it tells and conveys what is going on, where things are at, and what is the critical path. If you get too granular in your details, well, then you've made an unmanageable, not really easy to analyze kind of schedule. Now, if you do it too high level, again, you face the same problem. You have a schedule that is not understandable and you really can't do true, genuine analysis on, including critical path. And also, which this is a very rare thing that occurs, is Monte Carlo simulations. So Monte Carlo, in plain terms, is a simulator, and it's not something you can do by hand. And there's no mathematical equation. Trust me, you can Google it. It's not there. It doesn't exist. It's a simulator that basically takes your schedule based on a lot of other factors that you incorporate, like, for example, if you do 3-point analysis, your risks, again, your logic, your baseline, when you're needing to, constraint dates, etc. What happens is that the Monte Carlo analysis simulates your schedule hundreds of millions of times to determine the probability of success or failure of your project. So based on how you build out your schedule, if you don't build it out right, well, you're not going to be successful, and it's going to tell you that. And that's where you may need to do alternative analysis, maybe you need to have conversations with the client, etc., etc. Anyways, that was my diatribe. Let's keep going. So this is the predecessor view here. This is your resource tab. It tells you if you got any resources assigned. Now remember, as mentioned in the previous tutorial, milestones do not have any resources associated whatsoever. Why? Because you can't associate costs to that, and it's a binary thing. It's either you did it or you didn't do it. So there's no way to really say, yep, check, this costs this much to do this milestone. Doesn't really make sense logically too. But if we were to look at some other task, we can see that, and we can see their units, the cost, who's the assigned owner, potentially even as well. Then we get to the advanced tab. This is where you can add all kinds of cool stuff. So obviously duration, deadline. So there's a difference between a constraint and a deadline. A deadline is just putting a peg on the board and saying, this is where we need to meet our date. But it doesn't have any effect on your schedule. Okay? Let me repeat that. The deadline function has no effect on your schedule in any way, shape, or form when it comes to critical path, when it comes to the cost, you name it. Deadline is just a deadline. It's just a point in time. It's the line in the sand that says this is when it needs to be done. Then you have constraint type. This one actually does have impact on your schedule, and you're going to see when we put this in here, because I'm going to first put the constraint in so that we don't lose our constraint, or our finish date that we need to meet contractually, because we're pretending that there's a contractual obligation, right? Because we did backwards planning. And then we're going to change the project information to do just, the start date of when we need to start. Okay. Which that's going to be fun when we start to look at it, because that's going to adjust, because we're going to do something cool with it. So you also have like task type. There's fixed units, there's fixed duration, fixed work. It just depends on what you want to do. We won't get too deep into that. There's WBS code, which basically means, there's an automated WBS within Microsoft Project that kind of breaks it down for you, but it's not very, specific. It doesn't really define the work packages in an essence, because it's just kind of one of those, again, like the ID column, where if as you delete stuff, it kind of shifts and moves. And it kind of associates your low level tasks with the WBS, which does not make sense, because the purpose of a WBS is to decompose the scope to a level that is definable, specific, and that you're able to associate cost, schedule, and resources to. Whereas the automated WBS in Microsoft Project doesn't necessarily do that. It just kind of associates an ID, and then, as I said, like the ID column, you can delete things and it shifts and moves. So it's not worthwhile. We may, if you're interested in another tutorial, we can then go deeper into other functions and building out our own customizable WBSs and such. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to add the constraint type. Now, there are multiple types. So there's very soft constraints. So start no earlier than is your softest constraint. So if you throw that on there, it will allow things to shift and move. It's kind of similar to also finish earlier and finish no later. Same thing with start no later then. Those are the softer constraints, and they allow your schedule to move and shift, but it will hold things if, there's not any shifts in your schedule in the predecessors before the constraint item. Now, if there is push in the predecessors before the constraint item, then yeah, it's not going to really hold it. The tough ones, or the ones that don't allow any movement, are the must finish on and the must start on. Those are the most really tough constraint types. Why? Because they don't allow your dates to shift afterwards. So there is an example where CBP, this is a government entity, and I think it was CBP, they built their schedule and they used a must finish on. And what happened was is any successor task after the milestone that had the must finish on didn't shift. But everything before that milestone, the predecessors of that milestone with the must finish on constraint, were shifting and moving and causing all kinds of chaos. But because of that must finish on constraint, it wasn't giving management any idea of what were the impacts to the latter milestones. And so, well, they got in trouble for that. Long story short, and their project wasn't successful. Go figure. But for our example, we are going to try and just use that. Although I think I'm just gonna put a start note earlier then and just put in. And you can also type it too. You can just do 1/2024 and hit OK. So now I've got my constraint there, right? Also, there's this function, if you remember last time in our previous tutorial, where we talked about how you can have an automatic save every 10 minutes or whatever. That's, something you can do. So now we're going to do project information, and we're just going to do start date. Now, this is where we can have a little fun, although we do need to add a couple more holidays, but we're going to skip that, to be honest, because it's in the previous tutorial and it's also in my course. So, but let's have a little fun. So, of course, when we did the backwards planning, right, we pushed the start date all the way back to January 1 of 2022. So now, if we were to make adjustments, let's say we really want to start November, just for fun. Funsies. Let's just see. What kind of impact's that going to have? Can we go okay? So here you go. So Microsoft Project, when you start making changes like that, it's going to warn you. So say this will remove leveling delays. Changing the schedule from setting will remove leveling delay and leveling splits from tasks and assignments. So if you've done task leveling, like you leveled your resources or baselined them basically, or if you did any kind of splits in your tasks, for example, and you make an adjustment like this where it's really big and major, Microsoft Project's going to warn you. I just want to see for funsies. And then, of course, it's going to say project cannot resolve the overallocations of this resource, the name Jessica. So you either continue leveling other overallocated resources, you can click skip. You're going to do skip all because obviously that resource is associated with multiple tasks, right? So you're going to say skip all. And as you see, there's a major change to the schedule. And you see it's not meeting our date. And as you see, the start no earlier than constraint is a soft constraint. So, of course, the adjustment to the schedule pushed it all the way out. And over here in your status indicator, we now have resource over allocation. Now, in the real world, if these were normal tasks, You could make adjustments to the durations and do alternative analysis, which is also encouraged in the PMBOK. You can do alternative analysis to make sure you can meet dates. So maybe for funsies, we can kind of see if this will change anything. Yes, skip all. Skip all. So as you see, I'm making adjustments. So now look, we're pulling things back because we're doing an alternative analysis to the business case and benefits management plan, and we're probably going to make an adjustment to the project charter just so we can keep it on this date, right? And that's fine. And as you're seeing too, we are making total adjustments to our cost column here, which is an automatic column that adjusts as you shift and move duration, as you shift and move resources, all that jazz. And as you see, that's what's happening. Now, actual cost is not doing anything because we haven't done any percent completes. But as you see, and it's taking a minute to, oh, here we go again. If you also remember at the very end of the tutorial, the file was also starting to slow down because there's a lot. As you can see, if we were to do variance columns in here, you will see that we're having serious issues. Actually, I don't want to put them there. I want to put them here. Insert column, and I want cost variance. Now, as you see, we have we are over budget, as you can tell, because based on well, actually, no, we're under budget. Yeah, we're under budget right now. So this was our original, so we're under budget. We're not over. Sorry, didn't mean to say that. And then you can have now there are start variance columns and finish variance columns. The finish variance is far easier to just use than the start variance because who cares? You know, sometimes you start late and that's okay as long as you meet the date you were supposed to meet. Now, as you see, we are off by 21 days, but we are seemingly under budget at the moment. And actually, I'm just going to make sure. Yeah, so we're under budget at the moment because we're making adjustments right now to still meet that constraint date that we talked about. So we're just going to go back over here and we're going to keep playing with the durations a little more. So same thing here and watch. So of course we're going to do the skip because that's the resource that's over allocated. And now as you see, that has made adjustments in terms of the cost and the finish date, but we're still not quite there yet. But what this means is from a perspective that we have started late, we're trying to finish on time. And that happens in the real world where you're not going to start on time for certain things, but you got to try your best to meet a certain finish date. And I mean, yeah, that's kind of not good because then it's like, well, the customers should be a little more flexible, shouldn't they? Well, that's also not reality. You got clients who are just pains in the butts, don't care. I want it and I want it now. Where is it? It should have been done yesterday kind of deal. And unfortunately, that's reality. So as you can see, we've made adjustments here. Let's go ahead and make adjustments elsewhere. So yeah, see the file's now slowing down again. Maybe on your end, because I do notice that it doesn't show up on your end, but it's showing up on my end. But that's also a forewarning to you as well. You know, when you start putting in a lot of information in a schedule, it does get a little funky over time and it will make things a little harder. Now, as you see, here you go. Now we could also make adjustments to our lag here. So maybe the client can't have 7 days. Nay, you got to get it done in 4. We're going to skip. That's pulled it in. So let's do the same here. gonna skip here. And there you go. So we kind of pulled it in. We maybe could make an adjustment. Maybe this could be 1 day instead of 5. And as you see, it keeps reminding me like, hey, you got this resource that's over allocated. What are you going to do about it? So, and now look. So we made all these adjustments, all this cost adjustment and everything to our schedule. And now we're still meeting our, supposedly, we're still meeting our date here. Now it's going to get interesting once we start actually baselining, or well, not baselining, statusing. Now, I do want to check some of the reports to kind of see if anything's showing up to make it look cool so that you're kind of like, oh, that's really neat. I see what's going on. This is telling the story. Exactly what I've been watching this past 35 minutes now. So we go again. Okay. Yeah, see, the schedule is taking its time. Okay, no, it's stopped. Okay. So let's just look at project overview. I just want to see what that one says because the cost ones are not going to have anything. Yep. So do you see here? There's no percent complete, obviously. That's the first thing. We do have milestones that are due, which are all of these. And then we got late tasks. So as you see, this is showing you these tasks are past due, and that's because we made that shift of the start date or the start of the project to a later time versus what we baseline, which originally was September, now it's November. So that gives you a little perspective there. Let's see what else. Again, the cost ones are not going to make any sense. Let's see. And we can see like slipping tasks. I bet that one's going to show something now. Yep, look at that. So you see that these are all the tasks that have slipped because of our adjustment to the schedule. So as you see, we've got our major milestone, we got our business case, all of these tasks, they're slipping because we didn't start them. And 1 and 2, we started late. See how cool this is? Let's look at overallocated resources as well. So again, that indicator was showing you right now that our resource Jessica is overallocated. So this is her remaining work. This is the overallocation. As you see, it's in the month of November. It's a high spike of 8 hours, and this is where she's overallocated in those 2 tasks. So as you see, we already got some reports that are showing some cool stuff. So now we're just going to go back to the Gantt chart and we're going to start doing basically our statusing. So first things first, and I think it's in yes, projects. So to set the status date, and the best practice is always status for a week. Never try to go beyond like forecasting like the next 2 weeks. One of the things I notice with project managers, CAMs, whatever the name is for them, project leads, tech leads, whatever their title. What I've seen consistently is that they're only concerned about what they're doing currently, which is the current week. Some that are a little more experienced, a little more savvy, will request. And notice I'm saying request, doesn't mean they'll do it. Some will request seeing a 2-week ahead look, but most times they tend to only look at the current week. So if you're going to set up the status date, what you do is you go to the project tab and under status, there's status date. Now, all you do is just set the date that you want. And just for funsies, we're going to pretend that we're statusing up to this point, the 18th, okay? So we hit okay. So now I'm also going to show you this. There's another automated column called status. Not status indicator, status. And I'm just going to pause right here just so you can see what you're looking at, and I'm going to be right back. All right, I am here. Sorry about that. So as you see, this is the status column. It's an automated column. Now, if you're doing status properly, it's going to be very useful. However, in the real world, that tends to not be the case. It tends to be, well, not the case, as I'm basically saying. Um, but this kind of helps to see, okay, what should I status and update? And as you can see, we've got a few things that are basically showing late. Now, I could show you custom views. There are ways to make really cool custom views that can just help you hone in on just specific things. However, I'm just going to be honest, we're not going to do that for this round. But again, if you're interested in that, please let me know. Again, you can, follow me and message me on all of the platforms that I'm on, and we can basically, go into a deeper tutorial where we do more advanced stuff. So here we're just going to update the following items. So as you see, now there's physical complete, and as I said, this is a manual column. So if I just do this, it doesn't do anything. But in percent complete, okay, I'm just closing some of this up so you can kind of see a little bit more of this. Because I also want you to benefit from seeing how all of this works, okay? Actually, we don't even need resource group anymore. I'm just going to hide that column. And I'm going to hide task mode because we all know it's an auto schedule. So now you can start seeing some of the other stuff. But if I update percent complete, watch what's going to happen. Watch the status indicator, this column. And yeah, that's the only place for the milestone. So when I hit 100%, yes, skip all. And in the status indicator, you have a check mark saying you did the work, binary, and the status column that's automated will tell you it's complete. Now, let's continue on. So that's all I just wanted to show you with physical percent complete. I'm going to hide this column now. As you see, it doesn't do anything. It's not even worth it. No point in having it. Uh-oh. Things are getting a little funky over here. Okay. So, now let's have a little fun. So let's say, yep, this is 100%. I'm going to skip all. Yes, this is 100%. Now, see, certain columns have shifted. Now, not just the status indicator and the status complete, the status itself, but look at also the actual cost. Now you see these are the costs have adjusted. And then of course we got the variance column over here. So we were under budget technically for these two tasks, okay? So oh, that's interesting. It didn't really. Huh, interesting. Oh, it's probably because we need to really know how much we're going to really spend, supposedly. Okay. So, okay, let's say, yeah, this is also done. Again. Oh, so this is also going to do that too. So if you're just doing 100%, 100%, 100%, it's going to show like, hey, you could just do this faster by clicking on the cell, and you see this really thin, and it's super thin, so you probably really can't see it well, but there's a super thin cross, and basically you just hold it and drag it, which I don't want to do because I want to show you something cool. But now let's say incorporating the peer review has actually taken longer. So first things first. if I'm statusing, I need to increase the finish date. So if, for example, my finish date is no longer the 16th, but let's just say for fun, I don't know if it's gonna, no, it's probably not on this. Oh, it did, finally. So let's say we're really gonna finish incorporating the peer review. Let's say the 23rd, so right before Thanksgiving. Which is where we probably should have added the holidays for this year, but you know what? It's fine. So I'm doing this. Now, as I'm increasing my duration, do you see how my cost is increasing? So then I see my baseline cost, which is 3,200 versus 3,800, right? So now my variance is over $640. Okay. So I'm just going to add one more day. And then not only that, because we're not incorporating this year's what you call it, this year's holidays. There we go. Had a brain fart for a minute. We're going to add constraints. So automatically constraints, when you add them in, are going to be start no earlier thans. So as you see, I'm adding in that date. And as you see, dates are shifting and moving. And just kind of opening that up a little bit more. Actually, I don't like that showing them that. Hold on one second. And it's probably going to change that for everything. I just want to see. Yeah. Nope, that's not it. Oh, it's display, not proofing. No, general. Yep, there we go. So I want the date format of this. So again, you just go to File, Options, General, Date Format, and you can change the formatting. So I'm just going to do that because I don't care if it's on a Monday or Tuesday or whatever, because we know what the holidays are. And then I can kind of close that a little more, just because I don't want to look at it. So as you see, we have movement. And so now I'm going to add a percent complete of, let's just say for funsies, 50%. And okay, so because we added the 50%, as you see, we have done the actual cost of 4,480, and now it's showing in the actual cost 2,240. And because we did 50%, as you see, the status column is showing as on schedule, which means, yeah, okay, the finish date's delayed, but we're on schedule according to the status because of the way we increase the percent complete. That's why this column is not that useful, because it's basing it off of percent complete, not what the actual dates are in terms of baseline versus forecast. But this is why we have a finish variance column that tells us how far off are we. So as you can see, we don't have a minus date in anything here. Okay, so this is why we've got 20.5 day variance. And as you see, we got all these variance days. So look, 44 days, and then everything else has been shifted to 7, as you can see, which means we're already late, and that's not good. But this is why we have risk registers. This is why we do documentation. This is why we do lessons learned. This is why you have integrated change control, for these reasons. You need to be able to prove when things are not going right and why. Not just because they're not going right, but why are they not going right? This is why they play a role. So now that we've done a little statusing, now we can go back to those fancy reports. So now we can look at cost. We can look at the earned value report. And as you see, it's giving you the variances. So this is our EAC, which is estimate at completion. That's 160,000. I'm not doing the full number, as you can tell. our actual cost work performed is currently at 14,000, and our budget cost work performed is at 26,514. And then if we look at our earned value charts over here, these numbers are showing right here. Okay, so you got the gray line, which is the BCWS, which is budget cost work scheduled. Your BCWP, which is the orange line, that's your budget cost work performed. And then your blue, which is your actual cost work performed. Then you got your variances here. So here is our variances, which the blue is the cost variance. So we've kind of dipped a little bit because we haven't done more work beyond what we've statused. Same thing here with the schedule variance. This is where we're at the orange line. So, this is our SV. So we are behind schedule, but we're kind of, yeah, so it's not a negative. So we are under budget right now. And you're probably going, well, wait a minute. There was one task that was over budget, but that's just one task. One task does not affect the entire budget, because you can make it up in other areas. So keep that in mind. That's why we talk about alternative analysis, right? Alternative analysis is finding ways to do things better, faster, cheaper. Sometimes that also means, yeah, we might take a hit at this task, but we can make it up for this other task. And that's the whole point of analysis and alternative analysis. Now you see your indexes, your SPI and your CPI, right? So anything that is less than 1 is over budget or behind schedule, depending on the index you're looking at. And anything above 1 is ahead of schedule or under budget. And yes, you can be behind schedule and under budget because it means you're not burning enough resources to make up time. And instead, you're kind of accepting that you're late and working at the pace you baselined. Now, both can also be in the negative as well, but in this case, we're showing that we are under budget but behind schedule. So this was a really cool report to look at too. I don't know why it's not going up. There you go. Okay, sometimes you just gotta be nice to Microsoft Project because it's sensitive. And then we can look at the progress. So we can take a look at the milestone report, late task, critical task if we want to. Here we go. We can do project overview, which we looked at last time. So as you see, our project overview here is that we're 4% complete. This is when we started. This is when we're finished. So we don't have any late tasks at this point, right? Because our status has been set to tomorrow, so nothing is late. And then, of course, we have our percent complete, which is over here. Now, if I do change that status, it's going to show late tasks. So watch this. So I'm going to go back to my Gantt chart. And I'm going to go to project. I'm going to change the status date. And let's, again, for funsies, let's set it to December 2nd and hit OK. It's taking a minute to think about it. All right, so now as you see, these are the items that are late only, right? So now if we go back to that report, actually, let's go a little further than that. Just kind of get some more stuff on here. So let's do December 9th. 2 weeks, few weeks. Okay, so we got a few things here. So now if we just go to report, we go back to, where was it? Progress, yeah. So we can look at the, oh yeah, it was overview. Never mind. Get it together. It's Thursday. Cut me some slack. So now, as you see, when we set the status to the later time, so instead of it being, the 18th, we now pushed it to December 9th. These are our late tasks. So now we see what's late, quote unquote. That means they're past due. So we need to status them. And what our upcoming milestones are due. So as you can see, all these are here. And as you see, our milestones for our start milestone is now no longer on the milestones due because we did it. Again, it's binary. You either did it or you didn't do it. So now we can look at maybe some other reports. So let's look at also resource over allocated resources, or we can look at resource overview. Let's look at that one since we haven't looked at that one yet. Ooh, now these look interesting. Now give me 1 second and I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. So as you see, this is our resource overview. We got our stats, our work status, and of course, other stats that are not in bar chart. So we can see, based on people, who's done some actual work, what work is remaining versus the baseline, right? So as you see, Sally and Alex haven't started anything yet, which obviously because they're later down in the schedule, as we know. But if you look, you got Peggy hasn't quite started anything yet based on the work status, but John, Mike, and Jessica have, and you see the percent of work that has been completed. And then if we look at these stats, this is showing per person what's remaining. So for John, he's going to fall off the project, quote unquote, by 21 of December. Mike is going to fall off at, um, 20 of December. And then, of course, you're going to have Alex and Sally. Now, of course, Jessica, that's not probably true based on who's the PM, right? And, you know, you might include, if you wanted to, what we call level of effort tasks. So, in scheduling best practices, we do have tasks called level of effort tasks. And these are the things that cover the mundane stuff. So, if you're in technology, for example, some of the mundane tasks may be like operations and maintenance stuff. I don't want to say mundane, but they're constantly done, but they're not so specific and discrete that it justifies steps in the schedule because you're constantly doing them, like operations and maintenance, break fixes, you know, uh, server downtime, whatever that may be. So an LOE will cover things like that. So then also for project managers, for your PMO, you can also do the same thing where you have an LOE that covers, the day-to-day activities of a project management office and a project manager. So you can, and some people may call it overhead work or whatever, but it once again, it's just the same thing. You can do an over encompassing, which we can do that. And in best practice, you break it down by month. Um, because if you do by year, it's not actually good practice because, that doesn't really tell me from a month to month basis how much I'm spending each month doing these overhead charges. Which again, they're not also on the critical path because they're just, level of effort things that you have to do on a regular basis. But it does help from a cost perspective to understand how much you're spending on a project manager doing that and a PMO and so forth. So maybe something to consider, but we're not going to do that for this particular project because I'm just naturally assuming that she's there. But we can manipulate the schedule a little bit and add her into other places if we wanted to. But let me make sure of who's the PM. So let me go to resource sheet. Yes, so Jessica's my PM. Okay, so I was right. So we're going to add her to a couple other tasks. So you're going to see the cost increase, right? And again, this is all part of analysis. So I'm just going to change the status date back to the 18th because I don't want to show them late for things when in reality I'm, just looking at currently. So let's go to, let's do sprint demo. Let's actually add her in here. And as you see, it's going to increase the cost. Let's add her demo as well. And let's add her to the retrospective. And then you're going to see we're going to control paste. So as you see, all the costs have adjusted. So of course our variance should have also kind of adjusted. Yeah, as you see, we're getting a cost variance that's increased because we're already past our baseline. So, and you're going to see that repeated everywhere else. And as you see, I'm not copying everything. I'm just copying the resources because that cost column is automated, so it's going to automatically do that for me. So now this is going to be like the paint drying moment where you're going to just see me go copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, just to kind of show you how things get adjusted over time. And then we're going to go back to that dashboard overview where, again, we'll look at, there's going to be an hours increase, a work increase for Jessica because we need to keep our project manager on the, the project. Well, we're not going to add Eloise. Yes, skip all. So, oh, so it did something funky. So just hit Control Z. Now here's the other thing about Microsoft Project I'm also going to add. If you save your file, you can't undo anything you've done after you saved. So you gotta make sure you undo any mistakes, if you call them that, or any, things that were kind of a misstep. See, like it will ask you. So I'm going to not save it for the moment because I want to make sure that I get Jessica built into all these other pieces, right? But again, as I said, if you save your file when you make an oopsie or a mistake, you can't undo it afterwards because Microsoft Project is just mean that way. It's not like Excel or, any other product from Microsoft where you make a mistake and you save anyways and you can still undo it. Can't do that with Microsoft Project. Don't know why they didn't copy that feature over. Don't ask me. I don't work for them. So, and as you see, the costs are increasing, and so you got your cost variances changing because of it, because you're adding Jessica now into everything. So that overview report's going to be really cool to look at. And of course, please feel free to add any questions in the chat at this point, since it's kind of a dull moment before we start picking back up. So if you got any questions, please feel free to ask. This is for your education. So if you're kind of like, hey, what's this all about? Go right on ahead. All right, so we've added her in. All right, so if we go back to report, and we go to the project overview again, we're going to see that she's added in there. Oh, no, not there. I'm sorry. The resource overview, not project overview. Now you see her hours have increased. Now she goes to the end of the project like Peggy, Sally, and Alex do. And as you see, there's a little bit of a decrease in Jessica's actual work now because we've added her to more tasks. Now, of course, that's increased our cost because, well, she's now part of things. So we can go to the cost overview, take a look at that. Okay, so this is our cost and total. This is what's remaining. That's our percent. So we have a cost status here. So we got the actual, our remaining, what our baseline was. This is the cost column itself and our variance. So we are under budget here because again, we're not burning enough resource hours to catch up and meet that date that we specified. And as you can see, the cumulative percent over time, cumulative percent's this blue here, and cumulative cost is this orange. And as you see, we're kind of, you know, and then we got our cost status. So the cost status for top level tasks is your baseline. So we have our baseline. So this is our baseline cost here. This is what's actual. This is what's remaining. So now let's go ahead and do some more fun stuff to the schedule if we want. So let's say, well, it's not okay that we're not meeting our January 1/24 date. So where can we cut time? And sometimes that is a conversation that you may need to have. So let's look at the sprints. So release 1 ends in April, okay? Release 2 ends in July. Release 3 ends in October. And release 4 goes all the way into that January timeframe. So here's something cool, or here's something interesting we could do. We could remove a sprint from the last release, which can really upset some agile fundamentalists if I do this. So watch this fun stuff. So let's just say for funsies, as you see, it's going to tell me there's over allocation. I'm going to remove this. And let's say I want to inactivate sprint 4.4. Now instead of deleting, we just deactivate. So what I did is I removed the logical linking between sprint 4.3 and 4.4 and removed the linking from the checkpoint to line 8, which is the milestone for release 4 complete. So now if I just close this and I highlight it, I can then do what is called inactivate. So that means that I'm not getting rid of the task because that's what I originally planned, but I'm keeping them inactive because they no longer have relevance. And how to ensure that these inactive tasks in some way don't impact anything is by just removing the logic itself or the predecessors and successors. So now as you see, I have removed this from the schedule, or I've inactivated. So now they will not have any more impact on anything that I do moving forward. And as you can see, as I'm trying to scroll because everything's taking forever, now I am at my 1/1/24, which is the release 4 milestone, which if I wanted to really see where my finish date is falling, again, I just use my deadline column and add in that deadline. And as you see, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to add a little like indicator here is what it's going to do. Where is it? Yeah, so see that arrow, which you can change that to anything really, but that arrow right here is your indication of your deadline. And again, it just doesn't affect or impact anything. It's just there to show you this is your deadline. And then if I remove my constraint, I'm going to actually see where, and there you go. So this is where my milestone is right now. So now if I go look at my finish variance, I have now a finish variance of -9 days, which means I have made up time to be able to meet my constraint date requirement from my client. Which now actually, if we wanted to go have some real fun, now we can again set our status date to, let's just set it to like the 16th of December. Okay. So now let's say I do finish this on time. . give it a minute to catch up. I'm just going to save even though it's not asking me. And then I'm going to do it again where I'll just drag these down and say, yes, I've met this. Now, don't ever touch your summary lines. As I said, the schedule is set at auto, meaning that everything will auto calculate, auto shift, auto this, auto that. The moment you touch the summary lines, which are always bold, they will immediately turn to manually scheduled, and then they will not have any impacts whatsoever. And then they're worthless. So you cannot touch your bold lines. This also means your summary lines should never have any form of resource association. They should never have any predecessors or successors associated either, because again, when you have everything auto scheduled, things will shift and move. You want what's naturally underneath your summary line to shift and move the summary line for you, not you forcing it to move on its own. Too many times I see people add, the constraint dates to it and predecessors and successors, and guess what? It gets all funky, and then they're like, I don't know what's going on with my schedule. Oh my gosh, help me. And there you go. So, now let's say my drafting of the project charter is not going well. Maybe, maybe some things occurred. Who knows? So again, first, before I add my percent complete, I'm going to increase my duration because I want to change my finish date. So let's say this is going to happen 10 days. As you see, my cost change, and look, I'm eating up the time I just made up because I took too long. And let's say, just for funsies, that I only got 20% done. Again, now, as I'm demonstrating here, this is why, again, the status column, this automated column, is useless. Because this, again, is only based on percent complete. So you saw for the first time, when I did 50%, it went, oh yeah, it's on schedule. And then when I did it here, I'm only 20%, now it's late. And that's not helpful because maybe I am still going to meet that finish date. I just didn't get a whole lot done. And I'm going to make it up next week, right? That's not what that's taking in consideration. This is going to lead into another potential rant. But as you see, this is where I'm at. And I'm still kind of under, I'm under budget here, so that's fine. As you can see, my baseline was 19,200, right? But that's really that. And again, we can go look at the reports and see like how everything looks, where things are at, yada, yada, yada. And that really helps with your internal teams, your client, and so on and so forth. Now, before I get into final thoughts and final recommendations and kind of advice for your career, do you have any questions? I'll give you a couple moments to maybe put in the chat if you got anything that you want to say. Okay, I guess there's no questions. I'm just gonna keep going then. So, in the PMBOK, in the schedule management chapter, it states clearly that any unrealistic timeframes and schedules is the project manager's fault. This is 100% true. I can't begin to tell you how many times in the real world I have had project managers make these unrealistic, ridiculous schedules for clients because they don't have an actual genuine conversation and saying, hey, client, this isn't realistic and these are the reasons why. And they don't do it because they're too worried about getting their stupid bonus or making their ridiculous boss happy instead of realizing that this is something that's going to be in their resume. This is something going to have to answer to and have to explain why it wasn't successful. Now, that doesn't mean that, project managers have to 100% be perfect and everything has to be done right and there can be no failures. No, that's not what I'm saying. But you as a project manager are the integrator. You're the one that's ensuring that everyone's talking to everyone, all the processes are working together as a cohesive whole, and that the engine of your project is running. And that sometimes means that you're going to be responsible for things like the schedule not being realistic. As we're seeing here, we faced a delay. If we were to put this in the real world, this could be a client delay. And the government clients tend to be the biggest offenders of this, where they're like, oh, well, this should have been started on this day, but we decided to take 200 years because we were playing too many red tape bureaucracy stuff. And now, because we're late, we still expect you, though, contractor, to be on time. Which that at that point, it's like you're setting us up for failure, and you're setting yourself up for failure. And this is where a lot of things come into play afterwards, where you have to kind of say to your client, look, you were late. So we need to renegotiate this finish date in some way, shape, or form. Or maybe there needs to be a discussion, a reevaluation of the scope. That is potential conversations. It's not that you're not saying no. It means you're trying to also look at what's best for the project and for your client. And a lot of times that doesn't really happen. So that's kind of my first spiel. My second spiel is the schedule is a very important and vital tool. Just like your budgets are, your schedule is as well. And one of the biggest things about agile fundamentalists that they get all in the tizzy about is that you don't need to do schedules. Well, no, that's not true. I just proved right here you can have a legitimate schedule right here. And the problem is that with agile, unfortunately, is that no one is willing, as far as I have seen in my career, that may not be the same for everyone, but no one is really willing to invest in the framework that has to be set up in order to really successfully use agile, because it takes a lot of money, a lot of time, and actually, news here, a lot of planning, which a lot of agile fundamentalists like to say, oh, no, you don't need to do a lot of planning up front, blah, 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 blah. No, that's not true either. You still need to plan out your framework. You need to plan out how things will be done. You can't sit there and wing it or do it based on how you interpret it and what you're comfortable with. But that's what happens in the real world. Too many times, people are doing agile the way they understand it and interpret it and what they're comfortable with. And that's just the unfortunate reality. So if you get into the scheduling realm or world, which leads into the next point, you need to be an advocate for the schedule. And not only are you need to be an advocate for the schedule, you need to be an advocate for the program's success through the schedule as well. Which is why it's still part of the PM triangle, by the way. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Now, if you are someone that's like, I know I want to get into project management world, but I don't know if I really want to be a project manager. That's okay. Scheduling, in my honest opinion, is the first step forward, because as a master scheduler or as a scheduler in general, you really get to see all the processes work together. You get to see how everything has to coordinate, how things have to work, and so on and so forth. Now, it does require a lot of being a little bit detail oriented. It does require you to be very proactive. It also requires you to be very communicative and making relationships with people so that people are a little more comfortable sharing scheduling information with you, because I'm going to tell you right now, some people have scheduling PTSD where they've had very, very poorly done schedules and they hate them and don't want to do them. So that's also part of it. So if you're not really wanting to do that, I don't recommend becoming a master scheduler or following that career path if you're not really into doing that. But if you are, I strongly recommend you do that. And the first thing is that you need to definitely learn Microsoft Project. Now, I'm just going to emphasize again on the things that I mentioned at the beginning of this stream. So our last two streams are going to occur on December 1st and December 15th, and then we get to enjoy the holidays. We get to enjoy Christmas and spend time with family, friends, or whatever it is you do. Okay? We will pick back up into a normal cadence starting at the beginning of the year in January. Also, if you want this channel to continue, please feel free to donate. I've included the PayPal link in the chat. It's also available in my link tree if you follow me on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitch, it's an individual link in itself. And I also recommend that if you want to keep up to date with what's going on and when I'm having streams and so forth, please follow me on all the social medias. So follow me on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. And I will be posting on most of those and all that. And last but not least, thank you so much for joining. And also, if you want to have the practical tutorial course on Udemy, the link is in the description in the chat right now with the project coupon code, which I'll include on the YouTube channel as well. And also, I will include the resource book from Amazon that will help you learn how to use Microsoft Project as well. Again, thank you for joining. It's much appreciated, PM Peep. And I look forward to seeing you in December. So have a great rest of your night. Thank you for joining and enjoy.